Standing on the front porch with my 4-year-old freezing in my arms, I realized that blood ain't always thicker than water, especially when money is involved. The wind was whipping around the corners of the massive Holloway estate like it had a personal vendetta against me. My son Leo buried his face into the crook of my neck and his little body was shivering so hard it made my own teeth rattle. I adjusted the thin wool blanket around him and knocked on the solid oak door for the 3rd time. My knuckles were raw and red, but I knew they could hear me. The music inside was loud, but it wasn't that loud. Through the frosted glass panels I could see the warm golden glow of the chandelier in the foyer. I could see shadows moving back and forth, laughing and holding champagne flutes. It looked like a scene from a movie where everyone is happy and rich and nobody has a care in the world. Leo looked up at me with big watery eyes and asked, "Mommy, are they gonna open the door?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile that felt like it was gonna crack my face. I told him, "Yeah, baby, they probably just have the music up too high. Uncle Mark will be here in a second." But deep down in my gut I knew Uncle Mark wasn't coming. My brother had changed ever since he married Brenda. Brenda was the kind of woman who thought looking expensive was a personality trait. She had this way of looking at me and Leo like we were stains on her designer rug. But I never thought she would do this. I never thought she would actually leave us out in the snow on Christmas Eve. I raised my fist to knock again, harder this time, but then I saw movement near the side window. The heavy velvet curtain pulled back just an inch. I saw Brenda. Her blonde hair was perfectly curled and she was holding a glass of wine. She looked right at me. Our eyes locked and for a second I thought she was gonna wave or rush to the door. Instead she just stared. Her eyes were cold like ice chips. Then she smirked a tiny cruel little smile and let the curtain fall back into place. The realization hit me so hard I almost stumbled back off the porch step. They knew we were here. They just didn't care. It was 20 degrees out here. My car was an old rusted sedan that barely had heat and I had parked it way down the driveway because Brenda had made a rule last year that old cars ruined the aesthetic of the front entrance. We had walked up the long drive in the snow carrying the gifts I had spent months saving for. "Mommy, my toes hurt," Leo whimpered. That broke me. The anger flared up hot and bright in my chest, but I had to push it down for him. I couldn't let him see me cry. I couldn't let him know that his own family treated us like stray dogs. "Come on, baby," I said, hoisting him up higher on my hip. "We are gonna go on a little adventure, okay?" I stepped off the porch and trudged through the snow around the side of the house. The snow was deep here and it soaked right through my cheap boots. I knew there was an old carriage house in the back. It used to be where my grandfather kept his tools and vintage cars. It had a wood stove and I prayed to God it was unlocked. As we walked past the dining room windows I saw them all sitting down to dinner. The table was set with the fine silver and the crystal glasses. There was a massive turkey and bowls of steaming food. At the head of the table sat my grandmother, Rose. She looked frail. Her white hair was pulled back in a loose bun and she was staring at the empty chair where I was supposed to be. I saw her mouth move, asking a question. Then I saw Brenda lean over and whisper something in her ear. Grandma Rose looked sad and nodded slowly, looking down at her plate. Brenda lied to her. I knew it as sure as I knew my own name. She probably told Grandma I was sick or that I decided not to come because I was too proud to accept their charity. That was Brenda's favorite line. She loved telling people I was a charity case just because I chose to be a teacher instead of chasing corporate money like Mark. We made it to the carriage house and thank the heavens the side door was unlocked. It creaked open and we slipped inside. It was cold in there, but it was out of the wind. The air smelled like sawdust and old gasoline and pine needles. I set Leo down on an old leather bench seat from a vintage Buick that my grandpa never finished restoring. "Stay here, Bug," I said. "Mommy is gonna make a fire." I worked fast. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the matches twice. But soon I got a fire going in the cast iron stove. The little flames licked at the dry wood and slowly a circle of warmth began to spread. I pulled the blanket tighter around Leo and rubbed his arms. "Are we hiding?" Leo asked, innocent as an angel. Yeah, baby, I whispered, kissing his forehead. We are playing a game. It's called Super Secret Spy Base. We have to stay here and be quiet until the mission is over. He giggled a little, and that sound was the only thing keeping me from screaming. I looked around the dusty carriage house. This place was filled with memories. I used to hide out here when I was a kid whenever my parents argued. Grandma Rose used to come find me. She would bring me cookies and tell me stories about when she was a little girl during the hard times. She always told me that dignity wasn't about what you wore or what you drove. It was about how you held your head up when the world tried to push it down. I wondered if Grandma Rose even knew what was happening. She was getting older and her hearing wasn't what it used to be. Mark and Brenda had taken over managing her affairs and the estate. They controlled who saw her and who called her. They had slowly cut me out, making it harder and harder for me to visit. Back inside the main house, the dinner was in full swing. I could only imagine the conversation. Brenda was probably talking about their upcoming vacation to the Maldives or the new luxury SUV she wanted. Mark was probably nodding along, spineless as ever, just happy to keep the peace. I sat on the dusty floor next to Leo and pulled out the small Tupperware container of cookies I had baked. I had nothing else to give him for dinner. Here, buddy, have a Christmas cookie, I said, forcing a cheerful tone. He took it with 2 hands and munched on it happily. I watched him and felt a tear finally escape and slide down my frozen cheek. I wiped it away quickly. I wasn't gonna let them win. I wasn't gonna go banging on the door begging to be let in. If they wanted to lock us out, then fine. We would survive. We always did. But about 40 minutes later, the door to the carriage house rattled. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. If it was Brenda coming to kick us off the property entirely, I was gonna lose it. I stood up, placing myself between the door and Leo. I clenched my fists, ready to fight if I had to. The door groaned open and a beam of light from a flashlight cut through the darkness. Who is there? I called out, my voice shaky but loud. The light lowered. Standing in the doorway, wrapped in a heavy fur coat with a silk scarf over her head, was Grandma Rose. Beside her was her nurse Maria, holding the flashlight. Elara, Grandma Rose gasped, her voice trembling. Grandma, I exhaled, and the relief made my knees weak. She hobbled into the room, leaning heavily on her cane. Her eyes swept over the dusty tools, the old car seat, and finally landed on Leo, who was curled up under the blanket with cookie crumbs on his chin. Oh my God, Grandma Rose whispered, and her face twisted in pure agony. What are you doing out here, child? Why aren't you inside? I walked over to her and she grabbed my hands. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Her hands were warm. We knocked, Grandma, I said softly. We knocked for a long time. Brenda saw us. She closed the curtains. Grandma Rose's eyes went wide. The shock on her face quickly turned into something else. Something dark and fierce. Her back straightened up, and for a second she didn't look 80 years old anymore. She looked like the Iron Matriarch who had built this family's legacy from the ground up. She told me you called, she hissed. Brenda told me you called and said you were too busy with your new boyfriend to come see your family. She said you didn't want to be around us. I shook my head, tears streaming freely now. Grandma, you know I don't have a boyfriend. And I would never miss Christmas. I made you a scarf. It is in the car down the driveway. They wouldn't let me park near the house. Grandma Rose looked at Maria, the nurse. Maria looked furious too. This is evil, Maria muttered, shaking her head. Pure evil. Grandma Rose let go of my hands and turned to look at Leo. She walked over to him and brushed the hair out of his eyes. Hi, my sweet boy, she said, her voice breaking. Hi, great grandma, Leo said. We are playing spy base. Yes, we are, Grandma Rose said, and a tear fell from her eye onto her cheek. But the game is over now. You are freezing. She turned back to me, and the look in her eyes was scary. It was the look of a woman who had just realized she had been harboring snakes in her garden. Elara, listen to me, she said, her voice low and steady. You are going to grab your son and you are coming inside. Grandma, I can't, I said. Brenda will just make a scene. I don't want to ruin your Christmas. Ruin my Christmas, she laughed a dry, bitter laugh. My dear, the only thing ruined is my trust in that grandson of mine and that which he married. They think I am old. They think I am senile. They think I don't notice how they spend my money and treat my family. She thumped her cane on the floorboards. Tonight they are going to learn that I am still the head of this family. But Grandma, I started. Hush, she commanded. Do not say a word. I want you to walk in there with your head held high. You are a Holloway. This is your house just as much as it is theirs. Actually more so, because you have the heart of this family and they have nothing but greed. She turned to Maria. Help me back to the house. We are going to make an entrance. We put out the fire in the stove and gathered our things. I picked Leo up and he wrapped his legs around my waist. Walking back to the main house, I felt different. Before I felt small and rejected. Now walking behind Grandma Rose, I felt like I was marching into battle. We reached the back door that led into the kitchen. The warmth of the house hit us like a wall. It smelled like roasted turkey and sage and expensive perfume. The catering staff was bustling around, but they stopped when they saw us. They knew me. I had grown up in this kitchen bothering the cooks for snacks. Miss Alara, the head cook, whispered, looking at my snow-covered boots and red nose. Not a word, Grandma Rose ordered the staff. We walked through the kitchen and down the hallway that led to the formal dining room. I could hear Mark laughing. It was that fake laugh he used when he was trying to impress people. So we are thinking of expanding the patio next spring, Brenda was saying, her voice loud and grating. Grandma Rose really wants to update the property value, you know how it is. She is lying, Grandma Rose whispered to me. I never said any such thing. We reached the double doors of the dining room. Grandma Rose stopped and took a deep breath. She looked at me and nodded. Open them, Maria, she said. Maria pushed the doors open. They swung wide, revealing the long dining table. The room went silent instantly. Brenda dropped her fork. It clattered against the fine china like a gunshot. Mark went pale, his mouth hanging open. Grandma Rose walked in first, her cane tapping rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I followed right behind her, holding Leo tight. Well, Grandma Rose said, her voice booming in the silence. It seems we have some extra guests. Or should I say the actual guests who were left to freeze in my backyard. Brenda stood up, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. Grandma, we didn't know. I thought. Sit down, Brenda, Grandma Rose snapped. The command was so sharp that Brenda actually sat back down like a scolded child. Grandma Rose walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit. She stood there looking down at them. She looked at the expensive wine they were drinking. She looked at the jewels around Brenda's neck. You told me Alara wasn't coming, Grandma Rose said calmly. You looked me in the eye and lied. Brenda tried to recover. She put on her best fake concerned face. Grandma, you must be confused. I said. I think I said she might be late. I didn't know she was actually here. The doorbell never rang. Liar, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. I saw you, Brenda. You looked through the window. You saw me and Leo standing in the snow and you closed the curtains. Mark looked at his wife, shocked. You saw them. Oh, shut up, Mark, Brenda hissed, dropping the act. So what if I did? Look at them. She brings that kid here looking like a beggar. It is Christmas Eve. We are trying to have a classy dinner with your business partners coming later. I didn't want her ruining the aesthetic with her sob stories and her neediness. The room was deadly quiet. Brenda realized too late that she had said the quiet part out loud. Grandma Rose looked at Brenda with pure disgust. Aesthetic, she repeated. You locked a mother and a 4-year-old child out in 20-degree weather for an aesthetic. She turned to Mark. And you? You let this happen. You let your wife run this family like it is her personal country club. You forgot where you came from. Grandma, come on, Mark stammered. Brenda just wants what is best for the family image. We are trying to protect the legacy. The legacy, Grandma Rose laughed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a heavy set of keys. She threw them onto the table right in front of Brenda. They landed with a heavy clank near the gravy boat. You want the legacy, she said. Well, you just lost it. What are you talking about? Brenda asked, her voice rising to a screech. I am talking about the fact that I have been meeting with my lawyers for weeks, Grandma Rose said. I had a feeling something like this was happening. I suspected you were isolating me. But tonight you proved it. You proved you have no heart. And a family without a heart is just a business, and I am closing up shop. Grandma Rose turned to the rest of the table where a few distant cousins and friends were sitting looking uncomfortable. Get out, she said. Everyone looked confused. I said get out, Grandma Rose yelled, pointing at the door. Everyone who sat here and ate my food while my granddaughter froze outside can get out of my house. Grandma, you can't be serious, Mark said, standing up. Where are we supposed to go? It is Christmas Eve. I don't care, Grandma Rose said. Go to a hotel. Go to the Maldives. Go anywhere but here. Brenda stood up, trembling with rage. You can't do this. We have rights. We have lived here for 5 years taking care of you. Taking care of me, Grandma Rose scoffed. You were waiting for me to die. I saw the brochures for the nursing homes in your desk, Brenda. Do not think I am blind. She turned to me and her face softened. Elara, come sit. I walked over to the table. I was still shivering a little, but the adrenaline was keeping me warm. I sat Leo down in the chair next to Grandma, the chair that had been empty. Maria, Grandma said, bring the boy some hot chocolate and some of that turkey. He must be starving. Then Grandma Rose looked back at Mark and Brenda, who were still standing there stunned. I am going to make this very clear, she said. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and leave. If you are not gone, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. This is insane, Brenda screamed. She pointed a manicured finger at me. This is all her fault. She manipulated you. She probably planned this whole thing just to get sympathy. Get out, Grandma Rose said, her voice like steel. Mark looked at his grandmother, then at me. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw something in Grandma Rose's eyes that made him stop. He grabbed Brenda's arm. Come on, Brenda, he muttered. Let's go. No, Brenda shrieked, pulling away. I am not leaving. This is my house. It is not your house, Grandma Rose said. It never was. And as of Monday morning, when I call my attorney, the deed will be transferred to someone who actually understands what the word family means. She put her hand on my shoulder. This house belongs to Elara now. I gasped. Grandma, no, I can't. Yes, you can, she whispered. And you will. Brenda looked like she was going to explode. She looked around the room, realizing she had no allies left. She let out a scream of frustration, grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room. Mark followed, her head hung low, not daring to look me in the eye. We heard the front door slam a minute later. Then we heard the roar of their expensive SUV speeding down the driveway. The silence that followed was heavy but peaceful. The toxicity had left the building. Grandma Rose sat down in her chair. She looked tired but relieved. She reached over and took Leo's small hand. I am so sorry, my boy, she said. Leo just smiled, his face covered in chocolate from the cookie I had given him earlier. It is okay, Grandma, he said. Mommy made it an adventure. Grandma Rose looked at me with tears in her eyes. You have your mother's spirit, Elara. You turned a nightmare into a game for him. You protected him. That is what a mother does. That is what a Holloway does. Maria brought out plates of hot food. We ate in the big dining room, just the three of us and Maria. It was the best meal I had ever tasted. Not because the food was fancy, but because for the first time in years I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. But the story wasn't over yet. Grandma Rose had one more surprise up her sleeve. After dinner she took me into the library. She walked over to the large painting of my grandfather above the fireplace. She reached behind the frame and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Brenda was looking for the jewelry, she said, sitting down in her leather armchair. She spent years trying to find the combination to the wall safe. She never knew that the real treasure was right here. She opened the pouch. Inside was a simple gold locket. It was old and tarnished. Your grandfather gave this to me when we had nothing, she said. We were living in a one-room apartment. We were freezing just like you were tonight. He sold his watch to buy this for me. She handed it to me. Inside were two small photos. One of my dad when he was a baby and one of me when I was a baby. He told me that as long as we had our people we were rich, Grandma Rose said. You remembered that tonight, Alara. You saved Christmas not by buying gifts but by keeping the spirit alive in a cold shed. I held the locket tight. Now, she said, her eyes twinkling. About that car of yours. I laughed. It is pretty bad, Grandma. Well, she said. Brenda left the keys to the new SUV on the counter when she stormed out. Technically the company owns it, and since I own the company. She tossed me the keys. I think Leo needs a warmer ride to school, don't you? Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story detailing the aftermath and how Alara handles her new role? That night I slept in a bed that cost more than my entire tuition, but I barely closed my eyes. I lay there staring at the silk canopy, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling while Leo snored softly beside me. He was sprawled out like a starfish, his little hand clutching that half-eaten cookie like it was gold. It felt surreal. 4 hours ago I was ready to sleep in a freezing carriage house on a car seat. Now I was the heir to the Holloway estate. It felt like I had stepped into an alternate dimension. I got up before the sun. The house was quiet in a way it never was when Brenda was here. Brenda always had the TV on or music blasting, or she was yelling at someone on her phone. Now the silence felt heavy but peaceful. It felt like the house itself was finally exhaling after holding its breath for 5 years. I wandered down to the kitchen. I expected it to be empty, but Maria was already there starting the coffee. She looked up when I walked in and her face broke into a massive smile. Good morning, Miss Alara, she said. Or should I say boss? I laughed and shook my head. Please, Maria, do not call me that. I am just Alara. I am still the girl who used to steal cookie dough from your mixing bowl. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to me. She took my face in her hands. You are different now, she said seriously. You walked through fire for that boy. You stood up to them. That changes a person. Your grandmother saw it. We all saw it. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the island. I need to talk to her, Maria. Is she awake? She has been awake for an hour waiting for you in the sunroom, Maria said. I walked through the house and for the first time I really looked at it. Under Brenda's rule everything had been white and beige and gray. It was like living inside an Instagram filter. You were afraid to touch anything. But as I walked I imagined colorful rugs. I imagined Leo's toys scattered on the floor. I imagined noise and life. I found Grandma Rose in her favorite wicker chair watching the snow fall on the garden. She looked smaller this morning. The adrenaline from last night had worn off and left her looking frail. Come sit, Alara, she said without turning around. I sat on the ottoman at her feet. Grandma, are you sure about this? About kicking them out? About giving me the house? It is a lot. She turned to look at me and her eyes were sharp. Do you know why I let them take over in the first place, she asked. I shook my head. Because I was tired, she admitted. I was tired and I was grieving your grandfather, and Mark stepped up. He promised to take care of everything. And for a while he did. But then he met Brenda and he stopped being my grandson and started being her bank account. She sighed and looked out at the snow. I tried to make excuses for them, Alara. Old people do that. We do not want to believe our family is rotten. But when Brenda told me you were not coming, I felt something break in my heart. I sat at that table feeling lonely in a room full of people. Then Maria told me she saw a light in the carriage house. She reached out and touched my hair. If you had banged on the door and made a scene, Brenda would have won. She would have called the police and made you look crazy. But you didn't. You went to the shed. You made a fire. You protected your son with dignity. That is when I knew. You are the only one strong enough to fix this family. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. I thought Mark and Brenda would fight us. I expected a long drawn-out court battle. But the thing about bullies is that they are usually cowards when you actually stand up to them. Grandma Rose had an ironclad trust. The clause was simple. She could revoke the living privileges of any beneficiary at any time for any reason. And since Mark had been using company funds for personal vacations without approval, he was terrified of being sued for embezzlement. He signed the papers quietly. I didn't see them until New Year's Day. I was in the driveway packing some boxes into the back of the new SUV. I was donating a bunch of Brenda's old stiff decorations to a charity shop. I wanted them gone. A taxi pulled up to the gate. I watched as Mark got out. He looked rough. He hadn't shaved in days and he was wearing wrinkled clothes. He walked up to the intercom, but I was already standing there. He saw me and stopped. He looked at the house, then at me. "Elara," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Mark," I said. I crossed my arms. I wasn't scared of him anymore. "I need to talk to Grandma," he said. "I need to explain. Brenda, she left me Elara. She took the jewelry she could find and she left. She said she isn't sticking around if the money is cut off." I felt a pang of pity for him, but it was small. "I am sorry to hear that, Mark," I said. "But I am not surprised." "Can I come in?" he asked. "I just want to wish Grandma a Happy New Year." I looked at him. I looked at the brother I used to play tag with. I looked at the man who had watched his wife lock my son out in the cold. "No, Mark," I said gently. "You can't." His face crumbled. "Elara, come on. We are family. We were family on Christmas Eve too," I said. "And that didn't stop you." I walked closer to the gate. "Grandma is resting. She doesn't want to see you right now. Maybe in a few months when you have got your life together you can write her a letter. But right now you need to go. You need to figure out who you are without the money and without Brenda." He stood there for a long time. The snow started to fall again, landing on his expensive coat that looked out of place now. "You changed," he said. I nodded. "Yeah." I finally warmed up. I turned around and walked back up the driveway. I didn't look back. I realized then that forgiveness doesn't mean letting people back into your life to hurt you again. It means wishing them well from a distance and locking the gate. The hardest part was adjusting to the money. I had spent my whole adult life counting pennies. I knew the price of milk at 3 different grocery stores. I knew how to stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 meals. Suddenly I had access to accounts with numbers that looked like phone numbers. At first I didn't want to spend a dime. I felt guilty. But Grandma Rose sat me down one afternoon. "Money is like water," she told me. "If you hoard it, it becomes stagnant and rot sets in. That is what happened to Mark. You have to let it flow. You have to let it nourish things." So I started to let it flow. I went to the school where I taught. It was in a rough neighborhood and the kids barely had books. I wrote a check that made the principal cry. We built a new library. We started a breakfast program so no kid would have to learn while they were hungry. I paid off Mariah's mortgage. When I gave her the paperwork, she screamed so loud I thought she was hurt. She tackled me in a hug and we both ended up on the kitchen floor laughing and crying. But the biggest change was the house itself. I took down the heavy velvet curtains. I let the sunlight flood in. I painted the dining room a warm, cheerful yellow. I bought big, comfortable couches that you could actually sit on without worrying about wrinkles. And I filled the house with people. I invited my friends from work. I invited the neighbors who Brenda had alienated. I invited the kids from Leo's class for playdates. The house came alive. The silence was replaced with laughter and the sound of running feet. One afternoon in late spring I was in the garden planting flowers with Leo. He was covered in dirt, looking happier than I had ever seen him. Grandma Rose was sitting on the patio sipping lemonade. A car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't a fancy car. It was a beat-up Honda. A woman stepped out. She looked nervous. She was holding a flyer. I stood up and wiped the dirt off my hands. "Can I help you?" I asked. She looked at the house, then at me. "Hi," she said. "I saw a flyer at the grocery store. It said there was a mother support group meeting here." I smiled. "Yes. You are in the right place." I had started a group for single moms. Moms who were struggling like I had been. I wanted to give them a place to come and breathe. A place where their kids could play safely while they had a hot meal and some support. "Come on in," I said, opening the gate. "The food is almost ready." The woman relaxed. She looked like she was about to cry from relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I really needed this today." As I walked her into the house, I looked back at Grandma Rose. She raised her glass to me. She was smiling. A real genuine smile. That night, after everyone had left and Leo was asleep, I sat by the fireplace in the library. I held the locket in my hand, rubbing my thumb over the gold. I thought about that night in the carriage house. It felt like a lifetime ago. But in a way I was grateful for it. If Brenda hadn't locked us out, I never would have found my strength. I never would have seen the truth. Sometimes you have to freeze to appreciate the warmth. I heard a soft knock on the door frame. It was Grandma Rose. "You did good today, Alara," she said, walking in. "The house feels like a home again. Your grandfather would have loved this." I smiled. "I hope so." "He would," she said firmly. She sat down opposite me. "You know, Mark wrote me a letter." I stiffened slightly. "Oh. What did he say?" "He is working," she said. "He got a job at a car dealership in the city. He is living in a small apartment. He said it is hard work, but he is actually sleeping at night." He apologized. Real apologies this time. Not the fake ones he used to give to get his credit card back. "That is good," I said. And I meant it. "I am not going to let him back in the trust," Grandma said. "That ship has sailed. But I might invite him for coffee next Christmas." "Just coffee?" I looked at the fire. "Just coffee sounds okay." She nodded. "Good. Now go to bed. You have a meeting with the scholarship board in the morning. You are a busy woman, Alara Holloway." I stood up and kissed her cheek. "Good night, Grandma." I walked up the grand staircase. I stopped at the top and looked down at the foyer. It was warm. It was safe. It was ours. I went into Leo's room. He was sleeping soundly. I pulled the blanket up to his chin. "I love you, Bug," I whispered. He stirred and mumbled something in his sleep. I leaned in closer to hear him. "Super secret spy base," he mumbled. I laughed quietly. "No, baby," I whispered. "Mission accomplished. We are home." I walked to my own room and climbed into bed. I didn't stare at the ceiling worrying about the future anymore. I closed my eyes and fell asleep, listening to the wind outside, knowing it couldn't touch us ever again. The house was big and the legacy was heavy, but I knew one thing for sure. We were never going to be cold again. And if the world ever tried to lock us out, we had the keys to let ourselves back in.